Welcome to Mysteries and Crime, your go-to channel for exploring the most captivating and perplexing true crime stories. If you love unraveling mysteries and piecing together the puzzles of history's most chilling cases, you're in the right place. Before we dive into today's story, a quick reminder: hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share your thoughts or case suggestions in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Today, we're delving into one of the most chilling and mystifying cases in American history, the Yuba County Five. This case, sometimes referred to as the American Dyatlov Pass, involves the mysterious disappearance of 5 young men from Yuba City, California in 1978. What began as an ordinary outing to watch a basketball game turned into a decades-long enigma involving strange discoveries, unanswered questions, and a tragic end for most of the group. Our story begins on February 24th, 1978. 5 friends, Jack Madruga, Ted Wire, Gary Matthias, William Sterling, and Jack Hewitt, set out for Chico, California to attend a college basketball game. They were excited not just for the game, but also for their own upcoming Special Olympics basketball tournament the next day. These young men were deeply bonded, united by shared challenges. Each had either a mild intellectual disability or a mental health condition. Despite these challenges, they were high-functioning and active members of their community. The drive to Chico was uneventful. The group enjoyed the game and left in high spirits, stopping at a convenience store for snacks on their way home. This was the last confirmed sighting of the 5 men. Hours later, when they failed to return, their families began to worry. These were men who valued routine, who wouldn't typically deviate from their plans. When morning came with no sign of them, their loved ones knew something was wrong. A search ensued, and after a few days, authorities located the group's car, a 1969 Mercury Montego, abandoned on a desolate mountain road in Plumas National Forest, far from their intended route. The car was in good working condition, with fuel still in the tank. Strangely, the keys were missing, and there was no sign of the men. The road where the car was found was treacherous and unpaved, leading many to wonder why they had driven so far off course. This initial discovery left investigators puzzled. The location of the Mercury Montego made little sense. None of the 5 men were familiar with the area, and the road conditions were rough, leading many to question why they would venture so far off their route. A closer look at the car revealed no signs of struggle or mechanical failure. The gas gauge suggested there was still enough fuel to drive back to Chico, or even home to Yuba City. Their families insisted that none of the men would willingly veer off course, especially not at night in an unfamiliar mountainous region. Jack Madruga, the owner of the car, was particularly cautious about his prized vehicle. He had an aversion to letting others drive it, and would never have driven onto such a precarious road without good reason. As the days stretched into weeks, search teams scoured the surrounding wilderness. Helicopters flew overhead, while volunteers combed the dense forests and rugged terrain on foot. Yet, there was no trace of the 5 men. The sense of unease deepened as theories began to emerge. Were they victims of foul play? Did they get lost and wander aimlessly into the mountains? Or was there a more sinister explanation? As the search continued, local authorities were joined by experienced trackers and volunteers from neighboring counties. The rugged terrain of Plumas National Forest made the search especially challenging. Steep inclines, dense foliage, and snowdrifts created natural barriers that limited visibility and access. Yet despite their efforts, no footprints, clothing, or other evidence was found near the car. This absence of clues only deepened the mystery. In interviews with law enforcement, The families of the men expressed their frustration and confusion. "They wouldn't have gone up there on their own," said Jack Madruga's mother. Jack hated the cold, and he would never leave his car behind. Ted Wyer's brother echoed similar sentiments, describing Ted as someone who hated being uncomfortable and avoided the outdoors whenever possible. These personal details clashed with the circumstances of the group's disappearance, leaving Investiga. What made this case particularly haunting was the contrast between the group's tight-knit camaraderie and the bewildering circumstances of their disappearance. These were men who relied on one another, and the idea that they would leave the safety of their car, seemingly without a plan, was difficult for their families to reconcile. The search area itself presented its own challenges. Plumas National Forest spans over 1 million acres, with rugged peaks, dense forests, and numerous trails. In winter, the landscape becomes even more unforgiving, with temperatures plummeting well below freezing at night. Searchers had to contend with icy winds and treacherous footing as they combed the wilderness for any sign of the 5 men. One curious detail that investigators uncovered was a set of maps found inside the Mercury Montego. The maps were in pristine condition, untouched, suggesting that the men had never intended to navigate the area. This added another layer of mystery. If they hadn't planned to explore the forest, what had brought them there in the first place? And why had they left the safety of their car to venture into such a hostile environment? The abandoned car was just the beginning of a mystery that would deepen over the months to come. Despite extensive searches of the surrounding area, there were no immediate signs of the men. It was as though they had vanished into thin air. Theories began to circulate. Some speculated that they had been chased or coerced into the forest. Others wondered if they had gotten lost and succumbed to the elements. Months passed with no breakthroughs. It wasn't until June, when the heavy snow of the Sierra Nevada mountains began to melt, that searchers made a chilling discovery. In a remote ranger's cabin, nearly 20 miles from the location of the car, the body of Ted Wyer was found. He was lying on a bed, wrapped in multiple sheets. Ted had lost nearly half his body weight and appeared to have starved to death, despite canned food and other supplies being available in the cabin. The group had broken into the cabin, but they hadn't made full use of the resources inside, including a propane tank that could have provided heat. The discovery of Ted Wyer's body raised more questions than it answered. Why hadn't the group used the supplies to survive? What had led them to the cabin in the first place? Investigators noted that Ted's feet were frostbitten, suggesting that he had been unable to move for some time. The question loomed: what had happened to the others? The remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found shortly afterward. Their bodies were discovered along the same road where the car had been abandoned, lying just a few miles apart. Both had succumbed to hypothermia, their bodies partially consumed by wildlife. A few days later, searchers uncovered Jack Hewitt's remains, scattered across a nearby creek bed. Like the others, it was clear he had died from exposure to the elements. But one member of the group was still missing: Gary Mathias. Unlike the others, Gary had no intellectual disability, but suffered from schizophrenia, a condition he managed with medication. His boots were found inside the cabin, leading to speculation that he had ventured out barefoot into the freezing wilderness. Yet despite exhaustive searches, no trace of Gary was ever found. One theory that gained traction was that the group had been fleeing from someone or something. The condition of their car left unlocked with a window partially rolled down, suggested they might have exited in a hurry. However, there were no signs of violence or struggle near the car. Adding to the mystery was the lack of logical explanation for their route. If they were lost, why hadn't they stayed near their vehicle? Experts agree that remaining with a stranded car is usually the safest option in such situations. The fact that the car was operable only deepened the confusion. In the weeks after the discovery of the car, the families of the Yuba County Five spoke to the media, pleading for information. They described the men as kind-hearted and unlikely to make impulsive or dangerous decisions. Each had a routine-driven life, and none were known to take risks or venture far from familiar surroundings. The media coverage brought national attention to the case, but no new leads surfaced. When Ted Wyer's body was found months later in the ranger's cabin, it painted a grim picture of the group's final days. Investigators noted that the cabin's fireplace hadn't been used, despite temperatures dropping well below freezing. Why hadn't the men lit a fire for warmth? Similarly, a storage shed nearby contained propane tanks, which could have provided heat and extended their survival. The unused supplies added an eerie layer to the mystery. The strange circumstances surrounding the cabin added a layer of psychological intrigue to the case. Forensic analysts theorized that the group may have been in a state of panic or confusion. The idea of groupthink was floated, a psychological phenomenon where a group makes irrational decisions due to collective pressure or fear. Could the harsh environment and fear of the unknown have clouded their judgment? Adding to the enigma was the timeline of events. Investigators believed that the men reached the cabin within a day of abandoning their car. This would have required them to traverse nearly 20 miles of mountainous terrain, often through waist-deep snow. Yet none of them were dressed for such an arduous journey. Ted Wyer, for instance, was found wearing a light jacket and thin trousers, clothing entirely inadequate for sub-zero temperatures. How they managed to reach the cabin at all remains a point of contention. The case took an even darker turn when additional details about the cabin emerged. Investigators discovered that several cans of food in the storage shed had been opened and consumed, but many more remained untouched. This raised questions about why the group hadn't made better use of the available resources. Could they have been too disoriented to think clearly? Or had something or someone prevented them from fully utilizing the supplies? Further evidence suggested that at least one other member of the group had been in the cabin with Ted Wyer. The presence of multiple footprints and signs of activity pointed to the possibility that someone had stayed with him for some time before leaving, or perhaps succumbing to the elements elsewhere. Yet the lack of additional remains near the cabin left investigators baffled. The circumstances surrounding Gary Mathias became a focal point for speculation. While his boots were found inside the cabin, no other belongings of his were recovered. This detail led some to theorize that Gary had ventured out barefoot in a desperate attempt to find help. However, with snow covering the ground and temperatures well below freezing, such an act would have been nearly impossible to survive. Was Gary Mathias the key to unraveling this mystery? Or had he become another victim of the unforgiving wilderness? The disappearance of Gary Mathias remains one of the most haunting aspects of the Yuba County Five case. Did he perish somewhere in the wilderness, his remains lost to time? Or did he survive and choose to disappear, escaping into anonymity? Without answers, his fate is a void that continues to baffle investigators and captivate true crime enthusiasts. Over the years, the Yuba County Five case has attracted a plethora of theories. Some believe the group simply got lost and succumbed to the harsh conditions. Others think foul play was involved. A local man reported seeing a group of people, including a woman and a baby, near the location of the Montego, shortly before the car was abandoned. His account, though unverified, has fueled speculation about whether the group encountered strangers who led them into danger. There are also questions about Gary Mathias's mental health. Could he have experienced a psychotic episode that led the group astray? Or was he, as some theorize, the sole survivor, choosing to vanish to avoid responsibility for the tragedy? The lack of evidence makes every theory both plausible and improbable. In the decades since the Yuba County Five disappeared, countless theories have attempted to explain what happened. One of the most enduring speculations is that the group was led astray by Gary Mathias, whose schizophrenia might have caused him to act erratically. However, those who knew Gary described him as a gentle, dependable person when on his medication. Without evidence, it's impossible to know whether his condition played a role in the tragedy. Another theory suggests that the men encountered a dangerous individual or group who forced them into the wilderness. This idea stems from the testimony of the local man who claimed to have seen a group of people near the Montego's location on the night of their disappearance. His account was never corroborated, but it continues to intrigue amateur sleuths. Perhaps the most frustrating aspect of the case is the lack of definitive evidence. Every theory, no matter how plausible, has significant gaps. Why didn't the men use the resources in the cabin? What happened to Gary Mathias? And what prompted them to leave the car in the first place? The Yuba County Five case has sparked debates in online forums and true crime communities. Some amateur sleuths have pointed out the possibility of an external factor, such as an unknown individual leading the men astray. Others believe the group's fate was sealed by a combination of bad luck and poor decisions. However, the lack of physical evidence to corroborate any single theory has kept the case shrouded in mystery. Gary Mathias's disappearance has fueled endless speculation. Unlike the others, Gary had a history of surviving difficult situations. Friends described him as resourceful and street smart, leading some to believe he might have found a way to escape the wilderness. Still, his medical condition required regular medication, and without it, his survival would have been unlikely. Was he the last man standing, or did he meet a similar fate to his friends, his remains simply never found? As the years passed, the case of the Yuba County Five continued to haunt both investigators and the families of the men. The lack of closure left a painful void, with more questions than answers. Why did the men abandon their car? What drove them to trek nearly 20 miles to the cabin? And what happened to Gary Mathias, the one member whose fate remains entirely unknown? Theories about the case remain as diverse as they are inconclusive. Some have speculated that the group encountered foul play, perhaps crossing paths with someone who posed a threat. Others suggest that they were overcome by fear or disorientation, leading to a series of fatal decisions. There are even those who believe in more supernatural explanations, though such ideas lack any evidence. Despite the passage of decades, the Yuba County Five case is far from forgotten. True crime enthusiasts and amateur sleuths continue to dissect the available evidence, hoping to uncover new insights. Advances in forensic technology offer a glimmer of hope that the mystery might one day be solved. Until then, the story of the Yuba County Five stands as a chilling reminder of how easily the mundane can turn into the macabre. Modern advancements in forensic technology offer a glimmer of hope. Cold cases once thought unsolvable have been cracked thanks to DNA analysis and new investigative methods. While the odds of finding Gary Mathias alive are slim, there's always a chance that new evidence could emerge. Evidence that might finally bring closure to one of the most perplexing cases in true crime history. This case stands as a chilling reminder of how quickly an ordinary night can spiral into tragedy. It has left a lasting impact on the community of Yuba City and continues to haunt the families of the victims. As new technology brings hope to old mysteries, perhaps one day we will finally learn the truth about what happened to the Yuba County Five. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share your theories in the comments. What do you think happened to the Yuba County Five? Could modern technology finally solve this decades-old mystery? Let us know your thoughts, and as always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.